My name is Daniel Campbell, and within 3 days, I'm turning 73 on 4th of October 1993. My 2 daughters, their husbands, and their children are coming over to celebrate it. I'm happy that my life has been so wonderful. Since early 1946, I had worked as a successful manager in a fishing harbour in the city of Perth, the largest coastal city in Western Australia. I worked there until my retirement on the 5th of October 1987. Now one might think that a birthday is one of the best days within a year, right? Well, they are true in some way. I mean, I am happy that my family comes over and that we're having a great time together. I always smile when I see my 5 grandchildren playing together, whilst we adults, including my 2 daughters, would talk adult stuff. But despite all the fun I'm having with my family on my birthday, when I am alone, even if it's just relieving myself, I can't stop thinking about my 23rd birthday back in 1943. Because one day after that birthday, I witnessed something that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and perhaps even in the afterlife when my soul would leave this world. I should start from the beginning, however, for this is my story, the story of the day after I turned 23. After the unexpected attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese army stormed through Southeast Asia. They took all of Malaysia, Singapore, most of Burma, the entire Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, many smaller islands in the Pacific Ocean, and also the northern half of the island of New Guinea. Their navy took most of the surrounding seas of these conquered territories, threatening the northern coast of Australia. The only thing that prevented the Japanese from launching an aerial or a naval invasion of northern Australia was the fact that the Australian army was still fighting bitterly in the southern half of New Guinea, where the Japanese had hard time moving through the New Guinea highlands and the jungles that cover it. I was already in the Australian army since 1939, but I had always been stationed on Australia's northern coastline to protect it from a possible Japanese invasion. But in March 1943, I was transferred to the front line in New Guinea alongside many other Australian soldiers. I was not fond of the transfer, not because I had to fight the Japanese, but because of the environment I was thrown in. The landscape of New Guinea was mostly covered with dense jungles, which made it hard to move through. It was also very hot and humid at the same time, which caused my Owyn gun to jam on many occasions. Then there was also the dangerous wildlife like mosquitoes that cause diseases, the many small venomous snakes that slither on you when you least expect it, and some unlucky soldiers were even surprisingly snatched by saltwater crocodiles. For the first months when I was in New Guinea, I never had been bitten by any mosquito, snake, or even crocodile. This was also the case with some of my colleagues in the platoon I was stationed in. The ones I knew best were Steve, Oliver, Lucas, and Jack. Steve was the kind of guy that helped others in need, but could be distracted easily by the sight of all sorts of wild animals. He is truly a nature freak and wants to be a zoologist one day. Oliver is the one I'm closest to. He is brave and unnerving and willing to risk his life for his comrades. He and I were already great friends a week after we had been stationed in New Guinea. Lucas might be an excellent shooter with a sniper, but he is a rather naive and shy person, rarely interacting with his fellow soldiers. And then there's Jack. He might have a personal group of friends, who I can see more as his lackeys. Jack is the guy that boasts about himself all the time, and how brave and strong he was. He's a real pain in the ass. Still, the entire platoon is united by our commander, John Evans, who leads it with an honest yet still iron fist. On the 30th of June 1943, the Allies launched Operation Cartwheel, with the ultimate goal to neutralize the major Japanese base at REPULSIVE on the island of New Britain. To do that, the Allies had to secure both the island and the islands around it, and the best way to enter New Britain is via the closest shore in New Guinea, which was under Japanese control. In the first stages of the operation, no real advancements were made on the mainland of New Guinea, but after the successful Allied bombings of many Japanese positions, we did advance northwards. Although it was not easy because of the dense jungles, our main objective was to take the Finisterre Range. By early October 1943, we did make some progress in the dense jungles of eastern New Guinea as we advanced north. That advance also happened on my 23rd birthday, the day before I almost died. Not by the Japanese, but by an ancient native horror. October 4th, 1943, 7 a.m., Eastern New Guinea. You'd think a man turning 23 would at least get a decent breakfast. Instead, I was half squatting under a dripping canopy, chewing on hard tack that tasted like termite eggs, while Lucas tried to get his boots out of a patch of mud that had clung to him like it was hungry. A thin layer of mist clung to the jungle floor, tendrils of it curling around roots and gun barrels like ghost fingers. The air smelled of wet bark, sweat, and something faintly metallic. Maybe blood, maybe rust. "Happy birthday, mate," Oliver said quietly, tossing me a small dented tin cup. "Don't tell the commander." He reached into his pack and pulled out a tiny bottle of whiskey, no bigger than my thumb, wrapped in cloth. I blinked. "Where the hell did you get this?" He gave me a crooked smile. "Let's just say I have friends in low, alcohol-fueled places." I glanced around. Steve was crouched nearby, drawing something in the dirt with a stick, probably an animal track, knowing him. Lucas had finally freed his boots and was now sitting on a fallen tree, trying to dry his socks with a match. And Jack? "Oi, birthday boy!" Jack shouted from behind, stomping his way through the underbrush like he was announcing a parade. "Heard you're 23 today. That's prime sushi meat, mate. Maybe the Japs will make you their birthday feast. You'd pair nicely with wasabi and cowardice." Steve groaned. "Jack, for once, could you—" "I'm just saying." Jack continued grinning. "If they find you in the jungle, they'll probably slap you on a bamboo plate and call it a day." Everyone chuckled. Even I smirked. It was Jack's way. Annoying, loud, but occasionally funny in the dark. Commander Evans marched by a moment later, barking softly. "Cut the noise. We move out in 5. Stay sharp." We didn't argue. Commander Evans was the kind of leader that didn't need to shout often, because when he did, things went silent. In that moment, I swore the jungle even hushed for him. We started marching north. 10:15 a.m. The further we pushed, the more the jungle changed. The sounds of birds became scarce. Even Steve noticed it, pausing occasionally to look up, confused. "Should be more chatter up there," he whispered to me. "This place is too damn quiet." He was right. No parrots, no monkeys, just a heavy thunk of boots in mud and the rustle of ferns brushing our arms and legs. We hadn't seen a single sign of Japanese presence all morning. No tripwires, no gunfire, no footprints. This was strange. Almost too strange. Lucas whispered, "Do you think we're alone out here?" "No such thing as alone in this jungle," Steve muttered. "Too many eyes." It wasn't paranoia. It was experience. Jungle warfare had taught us to treat every shadow like it held a rifle. But this was different. It felt like the shadows were watching, not with guns, but something older, hungrier. 1:30 p.m. We stopped for water at a narrow river that didn't appear on our map. No name, no markers, just a curling ribbon of greenish water winding through the underbrush. Its surface barely rippled, as if it too was holding its breath. That's when Steve said it again, quietly. "Something's off about this river." "Maybe it's the fact it smells like boiled frogs," Jack muttered, leaning on his rifle. "Don't drink it," Lucas said anxiously. "Seriously, don't." Commander Evans ordered us to refill our canteens from our reserves instead and rest for 15 minutes before pushing further. The jungle thinned slightly here, a deceptive comfort. The trees loomed taller, their roots twisting like skeletal fingers, and the light that broke through the canopy had a strange green tint, like stained glass made from algae. Oliver sat beside me and leaned back on his elbows. "Strange, isn't it?" he said. "What is?" I asked. He pointed toward the river. "No fish, no dragonflies, not even frogs croaking. When the water's this still in the jungle, you usually hear something living in it. It's like death itself took a piss here and cleared this place out." "Graphic," I said in a snorted laugh, but I looked again. He was right. The river wasn't just quiet, it was empty, like something had scared nature away. Commander Evans ordered us up again. Let's keep moving. We're 6 clicks from the next checkpoint. 3:45 p.m. We marched along the edge of the river for another hour before veering west into heavier jungle. The further we went, the thicker the canopy became. Vines wrapped around tree trunks like veins. Insects buzzed near our faces, but never landed. We hadn't heard a bird since noon. Steve muttered to me again, "This is wrong. The jungle's sick." He stopped and crouched near a tree root, inspecting something. I stepped closer. "What is it?" "Bones." I squinted. Buried half in the mud was the lower jaw of some animal. Maybe a pig, maybe not. Stripped of flesh, teeth still sharp. But the strangest part was the black scorch marks on the bone. Not burn marks, more like rot. The kind you'd see on something dead and underwater for a long time. "Should we report it?" He shook his head. "There's more ahead. I feel it." And he was right. Within another 100 meters, we began to see more. Rib cages buried in the roots, spines snapped like twigs, half-chewed animal carcasses hanging from trees, untouched by bugs. Lucas for once broke his silence. "This isn't a battlefield." We all turned to Lucas. "It's a feeding ground," he said in a very anxious tone. No one laughed. Even Jack was quiet. 8:15 p.m. Commander Evans ordered us to make camp early, something about terrain slowing us down, but I suspected he felt it too. The change in the air. We set up tents and sat around in silence, sipping from canteens and polishing our weapons in a quiet that felt like waiting for a storm. The river wasn't far. We could hear it gurgling, but somehow it felt closer than before, like it had followed us. Jack tried to crack a joke, something about the damn trees were looking at him funny, but no one laughed. We just stared into the foliage, hearing distant whispers. Maybe water, maybe not. And as night fell, we saw it. Green orbs. Watching, waiting. "Those green things," Lucas whispered. "You saw them, right?" "Eyes," Oliver said. "Had to be." Jack shook his head, rubbing his temples. "Could be phosphorescent bugs. Some of those bastards shine like lanterns." Oliver replied, his voice low and tight. "Then why were they staring right at us, like when we first got here?" No one had an answer. Commander Evans came by moments later, his rifle across his chest. "Get some rest," he said. "We move out at first light." "But the perimeter," Steve began. "Already set, and nothing living will get through it," Commander Evans replied. "Right," Jack muttered. "But what about something that ain't living?" Commander Evans shot him a look. "Then it'll die again." He walked off, but the silence he left behind was heavy, thick like the air before a monsoon. Oliver tapped my shoulder as I laid my head down. "I meant what I said earlier," he whispered. "About what?" "Something's wrong with the river. We shouldn't be near it." I didn't disagree. October 4th, 11:47 p.m. I woke up, choking on air. The humidity was brutal, wrapping around my throat like a wet rag. My skin was soaked, but it wasn't just sweat. It smelled like stagnant water, rotting leaves, something coppery like old blood. And then I heard it. It wasn't even raining. I slowly rolled over and peered beyond the tent flap. And that's when I saw them again. 3 green glows, floating above the river. But now they were closer. They moved, slow, deliberate, toward the edge of camp. They weren't fireflies. They weren't reflections. They were eyes. Large, too high off the ground for a normal animal. And they blinked, slowly. One set closed while the other 2 remained fixed on the camp like predators in the dark. I gripped my own gun and tried to speak, but my throat was dry. It was like fear had dehydrated my soul. Then came the sound. A low gurgling hiss. It sounded like boiling water forced through a throat too wide and deep to be human. Something in that sound made my stomach twist. It was intelligent, calculating, ancient, and I swear to God, one of the sets of eyes shifted and locked on me. That's when the screaming started. At 12 a.m. of October 5th, 1943, the scream came from the far edge of the perimeter. One of the privates, Jennings, his tent ripped open like paper. What was left of his body was being dragged through the mud by something we couldn't see, not fully, just shapes, rippling, moving, big, bigger than any crocodile I'd ever seen, bigger than a truck. All hell broke loose. Men scrambled from tents, bullets tore through the trees. The jungle flashed with muzzle fire. Steve shouted orders. Commander Evans was roaring like a lion. Lucas was already perched on a rock, sniping into the darkness. But nothing dropped, nothing bled. I ran with Oliver toward the perimeter, trying to make sense of the chaos. Until I saw the river again. Something was rising from it. 3 serpents, each one wider than a tank, covered in glistening green-black scales that shimmered unnaturally under the moonlight. Their eyes were the same glowing orbs we'd seen, now unmistakably attached to massive, horrifying heads shaped like twisted eels and dragons. Their mouths opened like inverted traps, revealing layer after layer of teeth that curled inwards, designed not to rip, but to track prey down. One of them surged forward, mouth agape, and I saw Private Balding vanish inside without a scream. Just a wet crunch, and he was gone. "Back! Fall back!" Commander Evans shouted, emptying his rifle into one of the things. But the bullets barely dented its scales. It flinched, annoyed, but not wounded. Jack ran past me screaming, "This isn't real. This isn't." But he didn't finish. Another serpent whipped its tail like a wrecking ball, sending him sailing through the air into a tree. I heard the cracking of bones. He didn't get up. Oliver grabbed my arm. "We have to move," Oliver yelled. "I can't leave them," I yelled back. "We're all going to die here if we stay," Oliver protested. Another soldier was caught mid-run, coiled by a serpentine neck and slammed into the earth so hard his helmet split. Steve was still shooting, face pale but steady, yelling for men to retreat into the trees. And then something unnatural happened. The river itself shifted. It rose, not like a flood, more like something beneath it was moving. The entire water surface warped and bulged, as if the serpents were just extensions of something much larger sleeping beneath, something waking up. Steve's voice cracked. "Go, go, go!" At around 12:20 a.m., we fled. Branches tore at our skin. Roots tripped us. I could hear soldiers screaming behind us. One by one, the sounds cut off. I turned to look, just once, and I saw Commander Evans standing at the edge of the jungle, firing his pistol into the river as the last of the 3 serpents lunged at him. His final words, swallowed by a hiss, were a curse I'll never forget. Then he was gone. We kept running, Oliver, Lucas, Steve and I, until the gunfire faded behind us, until the hissing and splashing were just whispers, until the jungle seemed quiet again, too quiet. We collapsed beside a moss-covered tree, panting, bleeding, shaking. Lucas was sobbing. Steve was staring at nothing. And Oliver, he clutched his side, blood running between his fingers. We can't stay here," he whispered. And I agreed, but I was too weak to move. I don't know how long we sat by that twisted old tree. Seconds? Minutes maybe? The jungle didn't just close in around us. It swallowed us. The trees thickened unnaturally, branches nodding overhead to form a choking canopy that blotted out the moonlight. Our only illumination came from the dim orange glow of burning tents behind us and the glimmer of sweat on each other's backs as we pushed through vines and mud. Behind us, the river screamed, not in any way human, but in thunderous crashes of water as those things moved inland. It sounded like a dam had burst and the water itself had claws. Every few seconds, I'd hear something crack. Not a branch, not a tree. Something more solid. like bones. "We need to slow them down," Steve hissed, barely keeping pace. His uniform was torn. A branch had opened a gash on his bicep, and he still gripped his rifle like it meant something. "No time," Lucas gasped. He was wheezing already, stumbling now and then, eyes wide and twitching. There, just keep going," I shouted. We ran like animals, hunched, tripping, clawing our way forward. Mud sucked at our boots. Thorned vines tore at our faces and backs. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore. It was panic, the kind that sinks claws into your lungs and doesn't let go. And the serpents were following. Not directly behind, not loudly, not like a bear or a tiger crashing through the brush. These things were too smart for that. They were flanking us. I caught flashes of movement through the jungle. A sinuous coil here, a slithering shadow there. Always just out of clear sight. Always shifting position. Hurting us. Like prey. "They're not chasing us," Steve muttered, panting beside me. "What?" I said, breathing heavily. "They're guiding us. Like they're playing with their food." I didn't want to believe it, but he was right. Every time we changed course, tried to veer off west or backtrack, one of the serpent shapes would appear up ahead. A brief flicker of scales in the moonlight, followed by a rustling thud of muscle against trees, blocking us, forcing us on a singular path. A path they chose. "Where are they taking us?" Oliver murmured. Then we saw it. Up ahead, the trees opened into a clearing choked with fog. In the center, a massive pond sat like an infected wound in the jungle. The water didn't ripple, didn't bubble, just sat there perfectly smooth. Too smooth. Lucas took one step back. No. We all stopped. The jungle around us went silent again. Then, behind us, we turned. One of them emerged, fully this time. Massive, towering. Its upper body alone was as thick as a truck. It raised high like a cobra. The moonlight hit its scales and shimmered an unnatural green-golden sheen. And in its eyes, 3 on one head, there was a focus that no animal should have. No hunger, no instinct, just purpose. It stared at us. Then 2 more came from the sides, encircling us. 3 massive serpent creatures, surrounding the 4 of us, pushing us toward the pool. We raised our weapons, trembling. Steve opened fire. Lucas dropped to his knees, and I gritted my teeth as I fired with my own gun at one of the serpents. "Go!" Oliver said out loud. "What?" I yelled. "I said go!" he yelled back. I turned just in time to see him rip the flare from his belt. "No!" But it was already lit. The flare hissed, red and screaming into the night. The serpents paused, flinched almost. Oliver stepped forward with a pained grin. "Come on, you bastards. You want a meal? Eat me." He waved the flare overhead, screaming. He ran at the closest serpent, not away. I tried to move. Steve held me back. "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't," I thrashed in his grip. Then the serpent struck. Not like a snake, not like something natural. Its head unhinged like a wet cloth, opening far too wide, impossibly wide, swallowing Oliver whole in a blur of red light and snapping bone. The flare dropped to the ground, spinning once, and went out. Gone, just like that. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Steve pulled me by the shoulder. "We run." Lucas was already gone, disappeared somewhere into the dark, whether ahead or behind, I couldn't tell. We stumbled through the jungle again, feet bleeding, eyes wide, hearing every twig snap as a warning of death. The serpents didn't roar. They didn't charge, but they followed. Oh God, they followed. They weren't normal animals. They were something else. Something that enjoyed this. And worst of all, they had names. I didn't know them, but they knew mine. I felt it in my bones, a presence that brushed the edges of my mind. Something probing, observing, learning. My name is Daniel, I thought, and something inside the jungle whispered it back. As Steve and I ran, our boots smashed through tangled roots and underbrush, crashing like wild animals through a forest that had turned on us. The air was heavier here, thicker. Every breath scalded my lungs like steam. The trees grew more twisted the deeper we ran. Trunks spiraled in unnatural shapes, bark warped like twisted flesh. The vines, I swear to this day, writhed slightly when brushed, like living veins recoiling from contact. Steve was ahead of me now, hacking a path with a bayonet. His flashlight beam cut a weak tunnel through the green haze, but the darkness beyond that was endless, as if light was being swallowed by the jungle. A tree limb cracked in the distance, something massive slithering through it. "They're tracking us," I wheezed, "like bloodhounds." "No, worse than that," Steve muttered. "They understand us." And they did. I could feel it, like they were studying our panic, measuring our hope, and slowly squeezing it out. Steve paused briefly at a fork in the jungle trail, if you could even call it that. One side led up a muddy ridge, the other down into thicker vines and mist. "Which way?" he barked. "Rich, get elevation," I gasped, my legs burning from the non-stop sprint. He nodded, and we moved up the slope, slipping on wet stone and grabbing roots for support. Somewhere below us came a sound like hissing laughter. I swear on my grave, it was laughter. I looked back and saw something emerge from the vines below. Not a full serpent, just the eye, green, lidless, watching. Then it blinked, slow and deliberate. "Go!" I screamed, grabbing Steve's pack and dragging him upward. At the top of the ridge, the roots thickened into a nest of tangled limbs. We leapt over one. Steve's boot caught. He landed hard. "Damn it!" he cried, clutching his ankle. I turned back, crouched beside him. His face was pale. "Twisted it bad," he hissed. "I can't run like this." "You're not staying behind," I said. "You won't get far dragging me," Steve protested back. "We'll hide. Wait until..." But I couldn't complete my sentence as something startled me. Trees below snapped like twigs. A wall of movement rose from the mist. Then we saw it. A long neck, black-green scales, rippling like liquid metal in the moonlight. It wasn't charging. It didn't need to. It was toying with us. I raised my rifle and fired 3 useless shots. The rounds pinged off its scales like spitballs on armor. "Go, Daniel," Steve said. "No," I stoically replied back. He drew his bayonet, propped himself up. "You were always the lucky bastard," he said with a smile that broke my heart. "Make it count." He shoved me backward, hard. "Run!" Steve yelled at the top of his lungs. I stumbled, hesitated one last second. Then I turned and bolted. Behind me, I heard the wet thump of something massive landing. A human scream, a final curse. Then silence. No gunfire. No Steve. October 5th, 1943, 1:47 a.m. I didn't know where I was running anymore. I wasn't dead, but I wasn't alive in the normal sense either. Not anymore. My arms were numb. My legs didn't want to move. My mouth was open, gasping, but no breath came at first. I choked on thick, humid air that tasted like copper and moss. My uniform was soaked, not just from sweat or blood, but from the river. I could smell it on me, that stagnant stench of something unnatural, something hiding beneath the water. I couldn't remember how far I had run, or even when I'd stopped, only that the jungle no longer screamed. It whispered, and it was listening. I tried to lift my head. The world swam. Trees blurred together like crooked fingers in a fever dream. The canopy above twisted in unnatural patterns. No stars, no moon, just a suffocating green-black ceiling. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my body felt 1,000 pounds heavier. My back was against something. A tree, I thought at first, but the bark was soft, wet, and it pulsed. I rolled off it with what little strength I had left, collapsing into a patch of black mud. The heat pressed down on me, unforgiving. My lips were cracked, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, and my skin, God, I felt my skin crawling. Tiny itches danced up my neck and arms. I swatted blindly, but there were no insects. Just the sensation, a phantom itch, like something inside me was moving. I lay there for hours, maybe more. Delirious, rambling nonsense, muttering names. Oliver, Steve, Lucas. Their names were mantras. If I stopped saying them, I feared I'd forget they ever existed. Or worse, that they'd forget me. Eventually, my eyes stopped blurring, and that's when I saw them again. Not the creatures, the eyes, just beyond the tree line, glowing faintly, low to the ground, flickering like candlelight. 3. Always 3. They didn't move. They didn't blink, but I felt them boring into me. Not hunting anymore, just watching, judging, like they knew I was broken now, that they'd already taken everything from me, except the part that truly mattered. Belief. I believed in them now, and they knew it. 3:40 a.m. Somehow, after God knows how long, I found the strength to crawl. I don't know how long I moved. I didn't care where I was going. There was no direction anymore, just a single instinct that screamed one word in the back of my skull. Away. I tracked myself across the jungle floor like a dying animal, through thorned ferns, over mossy logs, under fallen trees. My pack was gone. My helmet was gone. I had nothing but my sidearm and a fevered prayer that whatever gods ruled this jungle had grown tired of me. Eventually, I reached a ridge. It sloped down into a narrow trail. Something man-made, I think. Flattened earth, shell casings scattered, old cigarette butts. A patrol route. I collapsed there, face first in the dirt, the last of my energy draining like oil from a broken engine. The sky above finally began to shift. Not a sunrise, but the faintest gray at the edge of the canopy. I could see clouds now. Normal clouds. Real sky. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I remember smiling for what seemed the first time in ages. Then, darkness. October 12th, 1943, Australian Field Hospital, Port Moresby. When I opened my eyes again, the jungle was gone. The ceiling was white. The sheets were clean. Voices murmured behind a curtain. Medical clinking. The soft beep of equipment. I'm alive. Somehow alive. But as I blinked against the sterile light, my heart sank. Not in relief, but grief. Because I remembered everything, and I realized I was alone now, truly alone. I had been awake for over an hour without saying a word. I laid there beneath the scratchy white sheets, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in lazy circles. The hum was hypnotic, almost too loud. My skin itched, my muscles ached. I could barely tell where the pain ended and the numbness began. I tried to lift my arm. Tubes, bandages, dried blood under my fingernails. Finally, my voice came out dry and cracked. Where? A nurse was at my side before I could finish. A kind woman, mid-30s, brown hair in a tight bun, uniform crisp. I think her name was Margaret. I only remember because she called me love once, and I nearly cried. You're safe, she said gently. You were found 7 days ago by a forward recon patrol. You've been unconscious ever since. Fever, severe dehydration, lacerations, broken ribs. I didn't ask about my platoon. Not yet. I knew the answer before she ever said it. Eventually, they came for me the next day. 2 officers, clean uniforms, brass pins, shined boots. 1 Australian, 1 American. They asked for a statement. I gave them one, not a shortened version. The truth. From the unnatural stillness of the river, to the glowing eyes, to Oliver's flare, to Steve's final stand. I told them everything, the serpents, the silence, the eyes, the impossible scale of the creatures and how they toyed with us. They didn't stop me. They didn't laugh, but the moment I finished, they looked at each other, subtle, practiced. The American cleared his throat and said, "You've suffered significant trauma, soldier. Delirium in the field is common. Heat stroke can cause hallucinations." "I know what I saw," I said, trying to protest. "Grief can alter memory. Some men cope by constructing elaborate images of events," the Australian officer said. "No," I whispered. "That wasn't imagination. That river, it wasn't just water. It was a mouth." They didn't write that part down. When they left, the door clicked shut behind them like a coffin ceiling. Days went by, and I saw multiple injured, wounded, or even half-mauled soldiers enter the medical room I was in. They were mostly Australians, but some were New Zealander, and some were Americans. With the passing of the days though, I couldn't help but notice something strange about my other roommates. Some cried in their sleep, some stared at nothing, and some talked. Late at night, when the nurses dimmed the lights and only the wounded remained, I heard the whispers. Not mine, theirs. "Did you hear about that patrol that vanished near the Eastern Basin?" one would say. "Yeah, nothing left but boots and packs," another replied. "I heard someone say the trees somehow ate them," said someone else. "No, it was the river. There's something in the river," someone else replied. More voices. More stories. A man from Queensland said he saw a Japanese soldier get dragged into a pond by something with 2 mouths. A New Zealander said half his platoon was ambushed by a giant crocodile that stood on legs even bigger than a salty. One American corporal, gunned and wild-eyed, said he saw a giant snake with a human face. I couldn't sleep for days, not because I was afraid, but because I knew I wasn't alone. October 21st, 1943. I was lying in the hospital bed, certainly not moving too much to make sure that I would feel any pain. Just as I thought to close my eyes to take a nap, a soldier in an Australian uniform walked over to me. The man was darker skinned, tall, lean with sharp eyes like he could see through you. I believed that this was a native Papuan man from New Guinea itself. He didn't speak much at first. He just sat beside me and waited until the others were asleep. Then quietly, he said, "I saw you that night." I turned to him slowly. "Back when the stretcher team brought you in, you were covered in mud and jungle rot. You whispered names in your unconscious state. Oliver, Steve, Lucas, over and over." I sat up a little. "You hurt them?" He nodded. "I was in the region, a guide for Allied soldiers in the region. I've seen the trail you ran. I know what followed you." I stared at him with an expression that would ask, "What then?" And then he said one word. "Musali." I didn't repeat it. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "What is that?" He silently looked out the window. Eventually, he spoke. "In our traditions, the Musali are spirits, not ghosts, not demons, but spirits of the land. Some guard, some trick, and some kill. They live in the forests of these lands, and within the forests, they mostly reside in watery places like waterfalls, ponds, and mostly rivers, places that men do not belong." "Those creatures?" I asked weakly. He nodded. "Not creatures. Manifestations, forms they take to drive men away. They can take the form of many animals, but in most cases, they manifest as either giant snakes or crocodiles, sometimes with odd features." The man turned to me and said, "You're very lucky, Daniel. Most people who see the Musali do not survive. Mostly, before the victims of the Musali die, the Musali often toy with their prey's panic, and they study and even judge it in every detail." "I saw 3 of them, 3 monster-sized serpents," I said rapidly, trying not to breathe too heavily. "You saw one," he whispered. "The serpents are his parts. The body is beneath the river, buried, breathing, waiting." I felt sick. Why me? Why did I survive? I asked. Because one of your friends chose to die for you. The Musali respect that. They take, and they leave. 2, I said. 2 of my comrades sacrificed themselves for me. Then he stood up and looked down at me one last time and said, do not go back into that jungle. Not ever again. Then he left. No salute. No goodbye. But I believed every word he said. November 9th, 1943. The doctors cleared me for light duty. I was too weak for combat, too unfit for the front line. I was sent back to the northern coast of Australia, near the coastal city of Darwin, far from the jungle. I worked radio towers, transport relays, coastal watches, safe work, boring work. But every time I saw water, every time I passed a river, no matter how small, I paused. I waited, just in case, because even oceans are connected to rivers, and some rivers remember. October 4th, 1993. Today, I turned 73. The house is full of laughter. My daughters are here, both of them grown and beautiful in ways I could never have imagined when I first held them. Their husbands are good men, kind, respectful, and just a bit afraid of me, which makes me laugh more than it should. The real chaos, of course, comes from the grandkids. Anne, my firstborn, arrived, with all 3 of her children in tow. Emma, the eldest, just turned 11 last month, and the twins, Ben and Lily. Well, they're 7, and already running circles around the living room furniture like wild dogs. Sarah, my second daughter, followed soon after, ushering in her boys, Josh and Michael, but only a year and a half apart, but thick as thieves. They're already trying to sneak biscuits before dinner. It's a good day. A full house. Elsa, being my wife for over 40 years, made her famous roasted lamb, and the entire place smells like rosemary and sweet onions. She still smiles at me the same way she did in 1949, when we were young and half mad in love. I met her 4 years after the war ended, and I knew, just knew she was my anchor, my future. We married that same year. She never pried too much about the jungle. She knew enough not to ask, and I was thankful. I told her only once, long ago. She held my hand and said, "You survived something you weren't meant to survive. That makes you stronger than most." But it doesn't make the memories go away. Right after I was discharged after the war ended, I moved back to Perth and took up a position at the fishing harbor. A cousin of mine had worked there before the war. He vouched for me. By 1946, I was a manager. I stayed there for 41 years. People always ask why I never moved on to something more exciting, more upscale. But I like the routine, the structure. I like that the worst thing I had to deal with was late trawlers or dock disputes. I like that the ocean, even with all its mysteries, showed you everything on the surface. You could watch it, track it, unlike a river. A river hide things. Anne was born in 1954 and Sarah in 1956. Raising 2 daughters after surviving them, those serpents, was a strange kind of grace. I'd stand at their doors at night when they were small, watching them breathe, whispering names in my head. Oliver, Steve, Lucas, even Jack. All gone, and yet, somehow still with me. I'd read bedtime stories to Anne and Sarah when they were little, and sometimes I'd stop mid-sentence because my mind would drift. To mud, to fire, to that flare in Oliver's hand just before it vanished. Some nights I'd wake drenched in sweat, hearing the hiss of water moving against gravity. Elsa would hold me, rub my back, but says nothing. There are some things you can't talk about without dragging them back into the room. People never noticed it, not even Elsa, but every time I'm near water, real water, something inside me tightens. Not just the ocean, though I worked beside it for decades. I mean anything that flows, anything that collects. Ponds, streams, waterfalls, rivers most of all. Even now, 73 years old, surrounded by my own family, I still feel it. This noon, I went out to the bathroom to relieve myself. I stood there at the toilet, groggy, still shaking off sleep, and I caught my reflection in the water, the quiet shimmer, and suddenly, I couldn't move. I stared at it for too long. Long enough for the porcelain to fade into the background and for the water to feel too deep. Like I wasn't in a bathroom anymore, but back there beside that river in the jungles of New Guinea all those years ago. Then a knock at the door brought me back. "Grandpa?" It was Lily's voice, a bit worried. "You okay in there?" I cleared my throat. "Fine, sweetheart. I'll be out in a sec." I've never told the grandkids. Not the real story. They know I fought in the war, sure. They've seen the medals. They know I was in New Guinea. But they think I fought the Japanese. They think I was a war hero. They don't know the truth. That I wasn't a hero. I was a witness. The last one of a whole platoon. And some nights, I wondered if that's why I was spared. Not to warn others. Not to understand. But to remember. Because they don't forget. And rivers never let go of what they've taken. The sun has set. Anne and Sarah, their husbands, and the grandkids have gone home. Elsa is humming in the kitchen. The last of the cake has been eaten, and the candles are long since blown out. It was a good birthday. But later tonight, when everyone had left, I sat out on the porch, alone. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, the same one Oliver smuggled to me on my birthday 50 years ago, and I'll stare out at the lake across the road. It's calm tonight, but still, I know better. I'll sit there and wait, not for long. Just long enough to see if the surface twitches, or if a ripple forms without wind. And if I see those green lights again, just once, I won't scream. I'll just nod. Because I know now, some things never leave you. Some things wait.